Welcome to the cake baking module. We're going to be working on cakes. It dawned on me, and I could be wrong. We might have done angel food cake before a break last year, but it dawned on me that in your baking one class, which was last year for you guys, we didn't even get into cakes because we were done in the last 9 weeks and we're working from home. And it was quite a disappointment for some of you. So this is the section you've been all waiting for. I backed it up early. We're going to start it in January. We're going to run January, February, and March with cake and cake decorating, I think. And then hopefully April and May, we'll be able to do some pedophores and some other things along those lines. We'll see how timing goes. Cakes may go faster, and we may start into something else sooner. We will see. In the meantime, let's talk about cakes. So let's bake a cake, or several is the title of this presentation, because we will be baking several cakes. Now, with any luck, January 19th, I'm expecting that we will all be back in class. Hopefully that does come to fruition, so you'll only be baking a couple of cakes at home. And it won't be the ones that we're decorating. We'll be baking an angel food cake at home. We'll be baking a pound cake at home. One from the egg mixture structure and one from the fat structure, basically a butter cake. So those are the two cakes we'll be baking from home. Those are ones that typically don't have to be frosted, particularly the pound cake or the angel food cake, but they're really good as dessert cakes, as various different things around the house. You can't glaze an angel food cake. You can get a little a lemon sugar or lemon glaze or something along those lines if you want to, but that is up to you. We're not really having a lecture on the glazes in this, but you can look that up and glaze those cakes if you want at home, or you can just eat them as is at home. Make sure to take pictures. You'll need to follow the module requirements for distance ed while we're at home. Even if you're typically a hybrid student, we're all distance ed kids while we're at distance ed. So follow that particular procedure and let me know if there's any issues or questions you have on that. Hopefully, we'll be back in school to bake our genoise and our chiffon and our layer cake and our high ratio cake and stick those in the freezer. Okay, and then we can start decorating. All right, let's begin with the information on cake decorating. This is from chapter 13 of your textbook. And however, this presentation does cover quite a bit of that chapter, you are still expected to read that chapter. I'm only going to paraphrase it. I'm not going to completely read the chapter to you. This is not storytelling time. So I do expect you to read the chapter, and there's a couple of places in the start here format for teams that I have put in chapter links for you to read. I broke down the pages you'll need to read for the individual lab assignments, and you also have chapter 13 as a whole to read in the instructions, which is where this presentation will be, because this is an overall presentation for all of chapter 13. There might be a few other notes from me about cake baking and mixing, little added 2 or 3 minute presentations, but nothing as elaborate as this one's going to be. And I highly recommend that you finish this presentation prior to baking any cakes. The problem with baking is it is going to be exacting. You must measure properly, mix properly, do not overmix. I want to tell you a little story here about a student I had several years ago in baking too. It's a fine line between a nice moist cake you can decorate and be proud of, or a tire you could stick on a NASCAR and race it around the Indy 500 laps. And basically, this student got a tire or something as rubber-like as a tire. I kid you not, we dropped it on the floor several times. It did not break. It bounced. It was basically like a car tire. It was tough in the fact that it wouldn't tear, it wouldn't break. And predominantly, when doing the troubleshooting on what happened to the cake, the best we could figure, there was some mixing issues, probably some measurement issues, but for the most part, what we did is we overmixed it, and we created gluten that, even though we have tenderizers in the cakes, the more you mix, the more gluten you're going to develop. And when you mix that cake and mix that cake and mix that cake, which is the number one problem that students have, which is why I regale you with this story this year, is because my goal is, particularly working at home when I can't run around your kitchen and go, stop, stop, stop mixing that cake, is we're going to hopefully get you to understand the mixing principles of cakes. And that's something that, most all of you have been looking for this section, have been dying to get to this section, have been wanting to bake cakes and decorate cakes in this class since you came to school here as a freshman. So hopefully, if you'll pay attention, you'll become a decent cake decorator. All right, let's move on to the potatoes, meat and potatoes of this. Most cakes are created from liquid batters with high fat and sugar content. The baker's job is to combine all the ingredients to create a structure that will support these rich ingredients, yet keep the cake light and delicate as possible. Nobody really likes a dense cake, or a car tire for that matter. As with the other baked goods, it is impossible to taste a cake until it's fully cooked, and too late to alter the formula. Therefore, it's extremely important to study any formula before beginning, and to follow it with particular care and pay attention to detail. The most important part of what I just said, two most important parts, pay attention to detail, and to study the formula before you get a bowl, before you kick an egg out of the refrigerator. Study the formula. What is going to be required? Make sure your ovens are preheated. Make sure your pans are pre-greased if necessary. Make sure you have your pans ready. When the batter is done, to go looking for your pans is not proper mise en place. And typically, your batter could die while waiting for you to come up with a pan. When you're dealing with baking soda and an acid like chocolate or something along those lines, fruit as your acid to make that single-acting baking powder, your cakes could die while you try to find a cake pan to bake them in. So make sure you follow the formula, you have all your mise en place. That is going to be step one in getting this done. Okay, let's talk about cake ingredients a little bit. The ingredients and their functions. And this comes from your book as well. I'm only paraphrasing, so you will want to read about these in your book. Tougheners, flour, milk, and eggs that contain protein. Protein provides structure and strengthens the cake once it is baked. Tenderizers, sorry about that, a little slip of the tongue. Sugars, fats, and egg yolks, they interfere with the development of gluten structure when cakes are mixed properly. If cakes are over-mixed, there's only so much those tenderizers can do to stop the gluten development. But if cakes are mixed properly, those items, sugars, fats, and egg yolks, are going to interfere with the gluten structure. Moisteners, liquids such as water, milk, juice, and eggs, bring moisture to the mixture. It's necessary for gluten development and starch gelatinization, as well for improving cakes' keeping qualities. Now, I said something here that completely counteracts what I said before under tenderizers. Cakes do have gluten. You're not going to want to feed a cake that you're making in this section to someone who is having gluten-free diet or celiac disease or something along those lines. There is gluten in the cakes. What the tenderizers do for us is they keep the gluten strands from getting as tough. Where when we're making breads, which was baking 1, and sometimes some of you have done some of these this year in baking 2, we make some breads, dinner rolls, baguettes, something along those lines. We're looking for that stronger gluten development. And if you remember back to baking 1 and the gluten test, We're looking for those gluten strands, those tough muscles of protein in the bread. In a cake, we're not looking for the tough strands, but we are still looking for the muscle structure, because if we didn't have even a little bit of gluten muscle structure, there wouldn't be anything holding that cake together. So yes, even though when I said moisturizers are going to help with the gluten development, it contradicts what I said about not having too much gluten development from the tenderizers. All right, dryers. Flour, starches, and milk solids absorb moisture, giving body and structure to the cake. We have to have something that's going to absorb that batter, that moisture in that batter, and make that cake moist, yet dry enough to where we don't have to serve it in a bowl. Okay. Leaveners. Cakes rise because of two different things. The batter expands when heated, and cakes are leavened by air trapped when the fat and sugar are creamed together, by carbon dioxide released when baking powder and baking soda, and by air trapped in beaten eggs. Depends on which cake you're making and how it is leavened. All cakes rely on a natural leaveners, steam and air, to create the proper texture and rise. Because baking soda and baking powder are also used in some cake formulas, reviewing the material on chemical leaveners might be important. Okay. Flavoring. Flavoring such as extracts, cocoa, chocolate, spices, salt, sugar, and butter provide cakes with a desired flavor, as well as acidic flavoring ingredients such as sour cream, chocolate, and fruits provide acid to activate baking soda. So keep that in mind. A cake that you may only have baking soda in, not baking powder, which has both the acid and the alkali. Baking soda being the alkali, sodium bicarbonate, needs an acid to activate. So that acid could be chocolate, could be fruit, it could be sour cream, could be sometimes buttermilk. So these kind of things activate the baking soda and make it a single acting baking powder, one that acts when they're mixed together. Which means if you're doing that and mixing those together, you need to get them in the oven quickly. Remember what I said before about the cake pans. If your cake pans aren't ready, your cake batter could die while you get them ready. This is one of those instances I'm talking about. Okay, let's go to goals in mixing a cake. Our goals in mixing a cake are simple. Okay? We're basically trying to combine the ingredients uniformly and correctly, incorporating air cells, and develop proper texture for the cake. So let's talk mixing methods for cakes. There are basically two mixing methods for cakes, and that is those that create structure relying on cream fat, like a high fat structure, and those relying on whipped egg structure. So let's look at this cream fat structure a little bit. Okay, butter cakes, also known use the creaming method, and high ratio cakes also use that method, and that might be the next slide. Yep, there we go. So they're also using the high structure cream fat method. And we'll be going over these methods a little bit more in detail in the individual labs for these structures and a little bit later in this presentation alone. Egg foam structure relies on whipped eggs. And those cakes that rely on whipped eggs are genoise, sponge cake, angel food cake, chiffon. And we're going to be making a angel food cake. We're probably going to make a genoise cake, maybe a chiffon, maybe not a chiffon, but maybe a sponge cake. We'll see. I'm not exactly sure where these labs are taking us yet. But those are coming up. And you'll see those. Those rely on whipped eggs, which means you whip up your egg whites and you basically fold that into the rest of your ingredients. When I say fold, it's a very delicate process And if you overfold, if you just throw them in there and take a whisk and whisk them in there, your egg whites fall, thus defying or defeating the egg foam structure you're relying on, and you don't get the cake you wanted. So this is why cake baking is very important here. Okay, we're trying to teach baking that's not from a Betty Crocker box. Okay, you guys should be able to bake your own cakes that are better than Betty Crocker. All right, so let's get into this a little bit even more. See where we're at. Here's a type of cake: cream fat. Okay, butter high ratio, 2-stage, and butter is the creaming method. So we're going to do a little bit of that. We're going to do a creaming method butter cake. We're going to do a pound cake. Okay, that's one of the labs I said at home. We'll also do a high ratio because it's a 2-stage method. We'll do that a little bit later. After we're also going to do whipped egg cakes. We're going to make a Genoise cake. We are going to do angel food cake at home, and we're probably going to mix a sponge cake. And they all use egg foam. They all use that egg white foam as leavening. So it's very, very important not to over mix those eggs. Okay, and you're going to see that even in the angel food, which is usually a pretty easy cake for you to come up with. Most everybody has a bundt cake at home, a bundt cake pan at home. If not, and you need one, I probably can loan you one for this section for the first couple weeks of school, so get with me right away. A bundt cake being one of the pans that has the pole going up the middle. Angel food cake is way, way delicate. You can't bake that in a regular cake pan. You need that pole up the middle for it to attach to and climb up. And we're going to be talking a little bit about that and how to best take angel food cake out of the oven and how to present that. So we're going to be talking about this. I'm going to try to do a demonstration on angel food cake. I hope I am successful in that. Trouble is our recording structure is a little bit rough. So, but I'm going to show you how to take it out of the oven, and 2 minutes later flip it upside down and let it cool upside down for a half hour. So that's something I'm going to show you how to do in the bundt cake pan. So hopefully that's going to work for me. All right, so let's see where we're at here. Gravity, specific gravity will indicate if a cake batter is properly mixed, right? Okay, so if a cake batter is mixed properly, it's going to have a specific gravity. The amount of air incorporated in the batter, okay, relates to appearance of the finished cake. Too little air makes a cake tight grain and low volume. Too much air, the grain may be coarse. Okay. These things you have to think about. So when I'm talking about you guys reading the chapters, I just want you to know most of them are recipes in there, so you don't have to worry about that. Specific gravity is measured by the weight of the mixture in relation to the weight of water. Weight of the ingredients divided by the weight of water equals the specific gravity of the cake. And that'll kind of tell you what the density is in the gravity of the cake. So you could do that with an angel food cake, for example, and then a pound cake. And you'll see the gravity difference between the two. And those are a big explanation of the difference. And it's two different types, of course, because you have white foam, which is going to incorporate a lot more air. And then you have the pound cake, which is the buttercream. So that's going to be a lot more dense, and you're going to have a much bigger specific gravity in that because it's a dense creaming method using cream butter, cream fat. So different types of cakes, you'll see if you just do the specific gravity, this formula, based on those two recipes, you'll see a big difference there. And I won't make you really do the specific gravity on any others, but you might try it on those two just to see how they hold out. Okay, let's talk about panning cake batter. Most pans have to be greased or lined to prevent cakes from sticking, and fill pans more than 1/2 to 2/3 full because you got to have room for that air leavening and that leavening to happen, but you don't want them to overfill the pan too much. It ends up making a big mess in your oven, and nobody wants to clean that up. That's the least fun part of cake decorating. So make sure you understand that. You also need to know that some cakes need to be greased, some do not. So pay attention. And this table on pan preparation is, I'm trying to find it in the book to tell you what page it's on. It is on cake pan preparation 446, and 447 has a cake pan size. So those are going to be very helpful for you as far as how much volume batter you have and what kind of cakes you can make with that. That's very, very important. And one of the biggest problems we've had in class is kids just don't know how much cake batter to put in a pan, or what size cake pan, how much batter will make. So please take a look at those two tables. 13.2, which is this one here, tells you about what needs to be ungreased, like angel food and chiffon. They're very delicate as well. If you grease that pan, they will never rise. You're adding fat, you're destroying the air, so it's not going to work out so well. A lot of your fat cakes, your high fat cakes, will need to be greased so they don't stick, or greased and parchment lined. So those are things to think about there as well. And that's what this chart is talking about. Like I said, it's on 446 of your book, and 447 is cake pan sizes. I do not believe that is part of this presentation. So take a look at that. It's not, but take a look at that so you know what size you need. For example, if you have 1 pint of batter, a 6-inch round. Okay. So things along those lines. You can look that up. I'm not going to go over it here. So we want to preheat the oven before preparing the batter. Okay, remember, timing is everything. Okay, you must preheat your oven, get your pans ready, then make your batter. Okay. Test for doneness. The appearance, light golden brown, edges pull away from the sides of the pan. The touch, it springs back when lightly pressed. Don't press it too hard. And of course, you can stick a toothpick or a pointed object into it. You can use paring knives, but you want to keep your hole that you're putting in the cake, excuse me, yawning here, as small as possible. So I would recommend something along the lines of a toothpick in order to test doneness. And that's what we're talking, a cake tester. And you stick a little toothpick or something there, it comes out clean, then that means the center of the cake is good. Make sure, however, if you're baking a deep cake, that you are going into the center of the cake, not just around the outsides. It is possible for the top of the cake to be baked and the inside to still be liquid. So you want to go make sure whatever you're testing the cake for, you're getting into the center of that cake. Utmost importance there. Okay. 10 to 15 minutes in the pan to cool on a cooling rack, which can be an inverted sheet pan. It should be something that air can get around, but a lot of people don't have racks at home, and that's okay. If you're at home and you have a stove with the removable burners, like we have a gas stove, on that, just so air can get underneath the pan is what you're looking for. Air to get underneath the pan. And then you can, and keep them away from drafts and air currents. Sorry about that. I lost my train of thought there. You want to keep them away from drafts and air currents because they're still kind of delicate when they're super hot out of the oven. They're not really going to completely set until they've begun to cool. So taking them out and putting them in direct draft or current, or where people are moving around and causing drafts or currents, or people in small hands and animals and fellow classmates can start messing with cakes, they can still fall when they're 10 or 15 minutes, for the first 10 or 15 minutes that they're out of the oven. So keep that in mind. All right, troubleshooting for cakes. These charts for troubleshooting for cakes are on page 13.4 is on page 448 of your textbook. I'm not going to really cover it here, but these are some things that can happen to your cake, and why. And you'll see a lot of them: overmix, oven too hot, incorrect fat. Okay, so old chemical leavener, egg foam under whipped, or it fell. Okay, so these are some things that can happen. It was overmixed. We beat down our eggs. Okay, so keep that in mind. The things to look for when talking about cake troubleshooting. Oop, look, there's more. Yay. Okay. All right. So let's bake some cakes. Okay. Go on to the next part of the module. Read your book. There is a cake worksheet as well that you're going to be filling out. And let's start baking some cakes. Let's have some fun. The goal behind the cakes that we're baking, the high ratio, the layer, the genoise, and the sponge, the 4 cakes I believe we're going to bake to put in the, and we're going to make a chocolate cake. We're going to bake to freeze to decorate. So keep that in mind. We'll be decorating using the American method and the European method, taught by, not myself, because don't know or not, I'm not a cake decorator, but it's going to be taught by my friend, Chef Brian Pethley, out of Pennsylvania. He's got some great YouTube videos, and I watched his YouTube video on American decorating the other day. It's fabulous, and that'll be in the cake decorating module, which we'll go into next after we're done baking our cakes. And I think you'll like that module. I like it because it's actually shown students what I've always wanted them to see about layering cakes. It's very important to me to layer a cake. Typically, my students, and I'll talk about this in cake decorating, they want to just take the cake they baked, frost it, call it good. I want it layered, and I want it extra layers. I want 3 layers out of every cake. I'm that guy that wants 3 layers out of every cake. So we'll talk about that when we get into cake decorating. That's all for now. Go bake some cakes. Have a good time.